Hello and welcome back. I'm Jordan Small, Executive Director here at the Council, back with Leon Grice, Chair of the Council. Welcome back, Leon.
Yep.
And our special guest for the hour, Ryan Jennings, Executive Director of Buy NZ Made campaign. Welcome.
Thank you, Jordan, and good to see you again, Leon.
Yes, all right.
Yeah. So it's going to be another 10 to 15 minute segment. We are doing a back to basics on US elections, electoral, the ins and outs. So it's, what is this number, 270? Where does that come from? What does it mean? What is the role of the Supreme Court, the potential role of the Supreme Court? What other races are happening? So it's all of that stuff. Hopefully it's going to be useful for viewers and your members, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly. Like we're in business, you're always thinking about the business, the economy around it, maybe to a certain extent export, but not these macroeconomics. And politics is certainly a macroeconomic flavour. But what I don't understand, I think a lot of Kiwis don't, is we get these short sound bites from the US. But what's going on behind that? Like, what are all the things we hear about with like primaries and caucuses? What's the run-up been until now? And what are the rules that are different from New Zealand? Like we've just had our MMP election. We understand how it works here. How's it working in the US and why should this matter to New Zealand manufacturing and businesses?
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons why it matters.
And I got a very good podcast answers many of these questions week to week because the FridayDownload.com. But certainly, let's jump into some of that.
High-end consumers, investment capital, innovation. Those are the three things why the US matters to New Zealand business. They are the most sophisticated capital providers in this country. I guess you could say Australia is up there as well, but there's no doubt American capital is crucial in our innovation, and they're high-end consumers. If you can sell it in the United States, you're going to conquer the world. And the third thing is, there's a lot of innovation that comes out of the United States that we leverage and sell on to the world. So what happens in the United States is just fundamentally important to this country.
And if you look at the fastest growing parts in the trade relationship or the commercial relationship with the US, it is in the stuff I know you're interested in, Ryan. It's technology, it's innovation. I think something like over the last 5 years, so 70% increase in technology exports.
Well, you've just launched a new brand, haven't you?
Yeah.
We launched NZ Code for those businesses in New Zealand that want to go to a broader marketplace. And for the US, many of them, that's like the top shelf. That's where you want to get to with your market.
Yeah, New Zealand brand's hot in the United States at the moment, so you couldn't be a better time to be launching a brand like that and positioning New Zealand for its intellectual property sales, which is the fastest growing export out of New Zealand into the United States.
Well, it's lightweight, it's service economy, it's not going to be held up by supply chains. And you mentioned before about the high-end consumers. We're seeing a lot of our businesses who want to export and using Amazon as the channel and just becoming a product on the Amazon marketplace, and that's reducing that distance because it's all digital.
Yeah, it's also, Amazon is a good place to be, but it's also a good place to actually build your customer base as well. And a lot of, even in the classic goods, the like skin products and those sorts of things, or even honey, there are amazing success stories where New Zealanders have got their foot into the US market by doing that. I lived in the States for 5 years and lived in Los Angeles, which was wall-to-wall Democrat in the time that we were there. But I'm very excited about the direction of the relationship between New Zealand and the United States. We see a lot of the worst news on TV, and the idea that the US is going to be in chaos. There might be some. It's a continent, and there might be some stuff that'll be newsworthy, and there'll be there might be some protests from either side. But the reality, for me, that having lived in the States, is that they're like us. The people live their lives like us. They're not going to go. Most of them are not going to go crazy. The vast majority. And so we've just got to keep it in perspective that it's a democracy, it's a vibrant democracy, and it's not going to go crazy.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into some of those questions you have. What's your first one?
Our first one is around the general election. What are the US population what are they actually voting for?
Today.
Yeah, like what's that part?
What
Is
are the
it-
races?
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's 3 main races, and then each state will have a number of other races potentially.
Ballot initiatives, yeah.
Ballot initiatives. So, of course, you have the presidential race, and there's the 2 main candidates. Are there third-party candidates?
Yeah, there are.
here?
There's a Green and there's a Libertarian
Yeah,
candidate,
Libertarian.
but they're not going to feature nearly as much as during the Clinton-Trump election.
Yep.
I don't think they'll have nearly as much this morning. So yeah, the top of the ballot obviously is the president.
Yep. And that's a race every 4 years, and then you have Senate,
Yep.
and that's so there's 100 Senate seats, and a third of those every 2 years come up for election
Because you have a 6-year term.
because you have a 6-year term.
6 years, not 4 years. That's a long time.
Yeah. So, and it just happens this year. There are a number of those seats that are up that are contestable. That there's an option there for the Democrats to compete and take some of those seats and potentially control of the Senate.
Classic example, Maine,
Yeah.
Susan Collins, is fighting to retain her seat, and it's totally in the balance whether or not she's going to retain the Republican Senate position for her party.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had, Jordan, is
Wait,
then on the
let's go to
oh,
the
there's
third
more.
race, which is for the House of Representatives.
House of Representatives, yep.
So, and they serve 2-year terms.
Yeah.
And so the whole House comes up for re-election every 2 years, which is
But you'll vote for your district, so you'll have a choice. So you won't be
Yeah.
voting for every race. You'll just be voting for the Democrat or Republican in your district.
So you've got House of Representatives every 2 years, you've got Senate at 6 years, and the presidential race is at 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's quite complex for the average Kiwi, at least for me to understand. Do Americans understand how this all works when they actually start ticking the boxes at the ballot?
Well, yeah, they call it the down ballot, and they do think that the first choice between the president has an influence on their Senate pick and their House pick. And then they also have ballot initiatives underneath it as well. And also gubernatorial, so some of the governorships are up as well. So you'll have President, Senate, House, Governor, and ballot initiatives. And so you've got a long ballot paper and you've got to work your way through it.
Give us an example of a ballot initiative as well. You would have seen a number of those in California.
Yeah, so the most actually relevant one for New Zealand was a privacy ballot that affected social media, meaning that you had to, the social media companies had to seek the permission of the consumer to be able to use their data. Very much like the GDPR rules out of Europe. But that was a ballot that won, convincingly, and then required the Californian House to pass legislation to curb the power of the social media. So that's an example of the kinds of ballot. Gay rights the issues are often on the ballot. You'll find marijuana will be a ballot initiative, just like here. But I think in terms of understanding it, this is a continent. This is like, that doesn't happen, but it's like the whole of Europe is deciding who's going to represent them in the European Parliament, who's going to be the Prime Minister or Premier of their country, and who's going to be members of their Parliament. And the incredible thing is it works. This federal electoral system holds this country together in incredible ways. And the states have enormous power as well. So the state elections are not irrelevant. Who's the governor, who's the Senate, those are very powerful positions where power is incredibly distributed in the United States. We tend, through the media cycle, to only focus on the power of the president, particularly this one in the last 4 years. But the reality is, he doesn't deliver healthcare or education or the roads, apart from the interstate highway system. Those are delivered by the state legislatures and also by the mayors. So the power is a lot more diffuse than it is in New Zealand. They have many checks and balances in the United States. We have very few. Our one check and balance in New Zealand is if you lose confidence of the House, you're gone instantly. But there are very few other checks and balances. We tend to give a lot of centralized power to the executive and prime minister that we vote for.
And that's by design. diffusion of power, right?
Diffusion of power, yeah.
Diffusion of power.
That's the way it was set up.
Yeah, that's the way it's set up. That's the way it's supposed to work. And so when you often you get a lot of commentary about the chaos of the US system, and and it's not working. And sometimes it's not working, but actually it's the slowing down of decision making, and that's the design.
Yeah, that's right. I think the other thing about the US, and I don't take a position on this, I'm neutral, but I'll just describe it, that the federal government, and Trump has been deregulating, getting the federal government out of regulating waste into the waterways. And there's a lot of criticism of that and a lot of support for that deregulation move. There's nothing stopping the states regulating for water quality in their waterways. And so, there's a fight between what the federal government should be doing, shouldn't be doing, what the states should be doing, and what they shouldn't be doing. And it's just been a constant arm wrestle since the Constitution got signed.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, I've already said it. I love the messiness of it. It's of democracy.
And
it's progress.
I think the concentration in power in New Zealand makes sense. It's a small, cohesive society. MMP has been important to bring in more diversity into our parliament, and that's right for us. But we shouldn't assume that it's a system that translates into a federal system of power.
Yeah. All right. Do you have another question?
Well, it's probably. I mean, you obviously enjoy it, and as you said, I think at the 1 o'clock is that you guys geek out on this, and I'm certainly a geek in other areas, probably a more of a spectator on the politics side of it. But I was interested on the the nationalism side of it. Trump's really gone in with America first. Biden has promised 700 billion government contracts will go to US companies. I run the Buy New Zealand Made campaign, and I'm also aware we do have a very export focused nation, and so we can't necessarily afford here to be picking where contracts are going to come from. Why is that such a big thing in the US? Why does that enter into the political sphere?
You have an answer for that one, Leon?
It's a seriously big question. I think if we start from a New Zealand perspective first, and then think about the US. From a New Zealand perspective, it doesn't really have an impact on us. It annoys the hell out of us that Trump is not supporting the multilateral system, because the US has been effectively an underwriter of the WTO, all those trading bodies and free trade, movement since the Second World War. And Trump is saying, I'm not interested in multilateralism. And so for us in New Zealand, in our farming industries, and also those are important institutions. But if you look at our sales and our exports, it really hasn't. The US is a pretty open market for New Zealand exports. My Frontier friends will say, pump the brakes there, coaches. But in most of the sectors that we're exporting, it's an open market. Mm-hmm. Most of the fight around trade is between the big industries, US Steel, what's his name, Lighthizer, the trade representative. He was a lawyer for US Steel. The USTR, the Trade Representative Office, is peopled with US Steel lawyers, and they're fighting big industry stories. That, China, Europe, South America, steel, energy, big exports. And we've got a couple of steel plants, and those tariffs are ridiculous for them. You cannot defend that. But the reality is it doesn't impact us. Now, when it comes to America first, I don't know. I've been talking for too long. Jordan, what do you think in terms of trade?
Well, I mean, I'd just go back to the point you made before that, so there's America first, but if you just look at our trade record with the US, it's trucked along. It's really, really solid, and it's in those, and I've already said it, in those key areas, really transformational areas, technology, IP, those bits of, we've been talking about for 20 years that we've, wanted to see growth in. The carbonless, the weightless, that kind of stuff. So that's what excites me. US, America first, whatever the
That's
trade
good to hear
relationship
that.
just trucks on.
Yeah, I think if from a trade and business opportunity, if Trump wins his re-election, I don't expect any particular change in approach. I think the rhetoric will remain the same. The lack of commitment to multilateralism will remain, and we'll just have to work our way around that. And we'll need to have stronger partnerships with Australia, Japan. I was going to say Europe, but we still haven't got an agreement with Europe. In fact, some ways Europe is a lot tougher market than the United States for New Zealanders, and we're not really honest about that because they're lovely Europeans. So I think if Trump gets re-elected, I don't really see much change apart from the multilateral thing. If Biden wins, he has said he's up for multilateralism. So I think we'll be re-engaging on those areas, and I think a lot of our trade diplomats will be a lot calmer.
Yeah. Well, I think things are picking up a little here. Just looking out into the courtyard across here.
Are they on their second drinks already?
There's more drinks in hand.
Yeah, that's right. I'll get a camera set up for the next hour so we can get a bit of a view of what's happening out there. It's looking. It's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. Any final questions? Any states you're particularly interested in or watching, or?
I'm interested in New York. I just think that is one of the the centers of the free world, and the things that happen there have an impact elsewhere. And I also just like the place. I love the pizza that comes from there. I like the optimism and the outgoingness and the slight brashness of the New Yorkers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And who knows what's going to happen and when trade's going to open up in terms of tourism. But what a place to visit if you get to go there.
Yeah, let's hope sometime in the not too distant future, Air New Zealand's New York, Auckland route comes back.
Yeah. Absolutely. New York.
Damn you, COVID.
Damn you, yeah. That was going to be a highlight of this year, was that flight. Not just for me, I guess for Air New Zealand as well. Quite disappointed, but never mind. Join us again at 2:00, so top of the hour.
And we might have some results in.
Yeah. Who will we have in? Who could we have in at that point? When's Pennsylvania coming in?
It should be coming in soon, but again, I'm not hanging out for it because I just think it'll be slow.
Yeah. And when are they counting their mail-in? I think it's
at the same time.
They haven't been counted already? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, same time. So we might have a little bit more race updates at 2 p.m. But join us then.